Hackers, welcome back to Health Hacker FX. We're back at it again. I've got my stylish blue blockers on because I've had a lot of screen time here lately and my head is going bonkers. But that's cool. We're going to get through this interview, and no better to have on this interview than Mans Denton. Many of you may know Mans through other realms, especially the nootropics realm. So who is Mans? I'll tell you who Mans is. Mans is a nootropics enthusiast and the founder of Nootropedia. He's currently working on a documentary film and a business that's helped people reharmonize with nature at the intersection of psychedelic experience and guided conscious hunting excursions, which is freaking right up my alley, both of those. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, Mans, by the way, Mans is a fellow San Antonian, as am I. So we have that in common as well. And now we both live in Austin because, no offense, San Antonio, but yeah, we both live in Austin for a reason. We'll just do it that way.
We'll leave it at that.
San Antonio is a good place to be from.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good place to be from. No offense, San Antonio, love you. You would be second on my list if I didn't live in Austin. Not really.
Can't say the
same. All right, Mans. Let's talk nootropics first, and let's kick it off by let's define nootropics for people, because I think that's something that people kind of have an idea of what we're talking about, but then maybe they don't.
Sure. So I think the reason there's ambiguity with the term nootropics is probably because it's a catchy term, but it really the term originates from a Romanian scientist in the 1960s who discovered piracetam, which is one of the first nootropics. And if I remember correctly, it's a Greek word, or it's a Greek combination of roots that suggest to change or to alter the mind. And the whole concept, according to the scientist who created this term, was that nootropics were supposed to be compounds, whether synthetic or natural, that could improve measures of cognitive performance without the risks of side effects. So if you are following a very strict definition of a nootropic, which are there are some people who do, specifically within the Reddit nootropics community, but many times things like modafinil, caffeine, definitely Adderall, they're all not considered nootropics because they're stimulatory and have a significant risk of a side effect. So within this very strict definition, a lot more different compounds that improve memory formation or mitochondrial health or things like that are considered to be a nootropic. However, I find that anything is a tool, could be used, improperly or properly, even quote unquote good compounds. And so I tend to consider any kind of supplement or compound that alters brain chemistry to be a nootropic. And so perhaps in some regard, I am to blame for the continued ambiguity within the term nootropic. But I tend to think of it as encompassing things like modafinil, as things like even psychedelics in certain instances, and also other, more commonly found things like fish oil, for example, things like that.
So you mentioned piracetam, which I remember from back in the day, and I'm saying back in the day, maybe, 97-ish, somewhere around in there. When that first came into my purview. But before that, when I was in the military, there was a pretty heavy use of modafinil during that time. Is modafinil the brand name, or was there another name before that? I can never remember.
Well, there's Provigil, modafinil. Yeah. I think Provigil's the more prescriptive term for it, although I'm not up to speed on necessarily what the community is calling a certain drug versus what the prescription drug is. But it was really it was intended for narcolepsy, modafinil, but it has very commonly been used in the military. In fact, many of the the studies that look at alertness and attentiveness are on, military studies, specifically because it's a wakefulness enhancer, which is a slightly different class from traditional stimulants, even though it works similarly. But that's, I'm sure why soldiers and people in the military could use that.
Yeah, so just N=1 experience. And I talked with Dan Party in an earlier interview about this, or it may roll out later. I don't know how this is all going to be packaged out and put up. But anyway, Dan Hardy and I were talking about that. And my N=1 experience with Provigil or modafinil, whatever the compound was at that time, was, yes, it did keep me very, very alert, very awake without jitteriness, or it wasn't like a caffeine type of thing. But that the after effect was pretty rough, meaning the crash afterwards. Now, whether that was just from pure sleep deprivation or if that was a chemical reaction within my body, it seemed to hit me a lot harder than it hit other people. And maybe that's just a N=1 biochemistry, within my own body. Most people seem to rebound it from it okay, but for me, it was hard. I mean, it was a tough rebound.
And I think that what you have alluded to there is one of the most important kind of precursors before going too far down the rabbit hole with nootropics, is being in tune enough with yourself to notice that change, and then have that scale for yourself, whether it's worth the downside, and then also to have the kind of like wherewithal that taking the substance is not, it might help you, but you don't want to achieve whatever it is you needed in the military by any means necessary, even your own, at the risk of your own health. And some people make that mistake where they'll take the modafinil, they'll notice the side effects, but they'll just keep taking it because they are more drawn towards some level of success as opposed to longevity.
Yeah, so it's all risk reward, and I'll just say staying alive is pretty good motivator for you to remain alert when you have to remain alert. So there is that. So there was. Yeah, the downside was hard, but the other option wasn't so great either. So, can you discuss a little bit about piracetam? And these are some of in my mind, these are the older school ones, simply because these were the first ones that came, onto my radar back in the day. And it seems like piracetam was a memory enhancing nootropic. Is that correct?
Yeah. So piracetam's it's a derivative of GABA, and that's a neurotransmitter that's pretty common amongst it's one of the top 4 that humans typically have. And the scientists did some tweaking, and piracetam and then a whole family of drugs within the racetam family were the result. And the racetam family is typically, yes, they are known to be memory enhancers. And if you look at the studies, they show that it's primarily true that piracetam, iniracetam, etc., can improve those with cognitive impairment. So most evidence, which is kind of a problem with all of the scientific studies within the nootropic field, but they all primarily look at people with some type of disease or ill health. So Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and then, oxiracetam, which is within that family, specifically seems to have some mechanism that improves people that have like brain trauma. So different, whether it be stroke or whether it's some type of other trauma, like TBI, oxiracetam tends to be really good. But memory and learning enhancement is definitely a part of the racetam family of drugs. It just seems that mostly it is studied in people who have some type of deficit, but because it's been around for 60 plus years or so, the there are some studies on healthy adults which show that it can improve memory and learning above the baseline. So I'm a particular fan of the racetams, specifically because of what it does for verbal fluency. I find that I have far more articulate conversations when I'm using the racetam family. But from the studies perspective, it's often memory and learning, as you said.
And most of these are, well, not most, some of these are pharmaceutical grade, correct? And some are, I don't know if over the counter is the right term, but supplement grade, maybe. Is that correct?
I think so. It's the ambiguity as far as their classification is probably one of the reasons why nootropics is used in ambiguous terms. The racetam family is used as a prescription drug in some former Soviet Union countries. So I think Russia may prescribe it, Romania, Bulgaria, etc. But in the United States, they're not considered a prescription drug. But they are also not considered a supplement. So from a legal perspective, you cannot say piracetam is a supplement. You have to use some other term. And the term that most people have started using, who are purveyors of piracetam, is nootropic. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why the term nootropic has become such a broadly used term, is because piracetam is actually a nootropic, but there are many that fall under that term because of legal reasons, where the people just won't call them supplements.
Right. But all of these are generally easy to get. I mean, yeah.
Generally, they're easy to get. You probably won't find them much in a brick and mortar store. So if you go to like a GNC or something like that, you probably won't find them. Mm-hmm. But if you do searches online, very easy to find racetams and many of the other drugs as well.
Or if you live in Austin, if you can just go to Garden of the Ancients, they usually have, they're usually well stocked. Although there is a shelf life concern with these and a purity concern too, right? Which always makes me wonder whenever I go to a place like Garden of the Ancients, not to throw them under the bus, but I mean, they have a bulk sitting there, right? And I always wonder what purity, yes, but the strength of the substance as well. It's got to have a shelf life, and I have no clue how long that's been sitting on the shelf there.
Yeah, so I don't know what the exact shelf life is of something like piracetam, but I will say that a lot of that, especially with any of these substances, is going to be dictated by the essentially how they're stored, because any kind of moisture and things like that that's what will actually change, some of the biochemistry of the compounds. The purity factor is a really important distinction that many people in the community have found, because it is in this gray area. It is very challenging to trust regulations. Not necessarily the FDA does a fantastic job by itself, but assuming there's certain restrictions and regulations for the FDA, that doesn't apply to these ambiguous nootropics and drugs. And so that's actually one of the reasons why a company that I co-founded in the nootropic space was doing third-party testing of all of the batches that we purchased and putting those files as a PDF on the product pages for people to view for themselves. So purity is definitely a big issue, and that's one of the reasons why at Nootropedia we have recommended vendors, because these are people that either I have relationships with and I've been to their facilities, and they have purity testing, heavy metals testing, etc. But those are imperative if you're going to start ingesting a lot of these substances on a regular basis.
Well, that's very, very important, right? Because more and more these substances are coming out of China, right? And it's just very, very tough to quality control a country like China, and I mean, we've seen a lot of this play out in the supplement industry and even in the pharmaceutical industry of purity questions from substances coming from China. So you really need to know what the source of your material is, as always, but no different in this case.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big proponent of people doing their research, and, whether or not they use Nutripedia, it doesn't matter. If you go to, the Reddit community, they are obviously very, communicative about their issues with different vendors and recommended vendors as far as the community is concerned. And so, I really encourage people before they get too far down the rabbit hole to consider, doing some research. And it's important stuff.
So for instance, if somebody wanted to, say they're an attorney and they're getting ready for the bar exam. All right. So there's one aspect where there is a retention aspect, right? And the ability to, let's just say they're in law school. They're just, and law school is typically just a very, very intense 2 years of study, formulate, not just regurgitate, but to be able to actually use the information in argument for argument's sake. Let's just say I'm an attorney in that situation coming to you, not that you're going to give me prescriptive advice, but what types of things could I use to make my experience better?
Yeah, well, I think that for lawyers especially, there's an opportunity to look at specifically what type of work needs to be done and how nootropics can fit within those specific tasks. I think, if you're going to try to eloquently portray facts and have even like a mock trial type of exercise, then, like I said, the racetam family is fantastic. I'm a really big fan of phenylparacetam specifically because that added phenyl group is somewhat stimulating, and I've done QEEG brain maps with Dr. Andrew Hill at the Peak Brain Institute, and he showed that phenylparacetam helped me to get into a flow state, or had brain waves that were readily associated with a flow state, with added creativity and added focus and concentration. And so, of course, this is an N=1 study using QEEG, but it does show that there's significant number of potential benefits using phenylparacetam, and the one that I particularly am fond of is the verbal fluency. And for someone who's doing speaking in that context as a lawyer, that's a boon over the competition. And of course, because it's part of the racetam family, it is also a memory enhancer. That's typically what it's used for in the scientific literature. So there is that benefit of being able to recall the facts, maybe dates, figures, whatever, from the briefs and utilize them in a trial setting. Now, as far as the actual studying is concerned, because I know they have long hours of studying within law school, I would really recommend they do cycling of different nootropic compounds, because oftentimes, especially in law school, it almost becomes a competition of how much caffeine can you drink. Just like you need to stay up, you need to do more work, more coffee. And as everybody knows, caffeine tends to have a decreased effect in most people from a stimulation and alertness perspective. And so, obviously this varies person to person. I add that caveat because I know that you suck down coffee like crazy.
I seem to be immune to the effects of caffeine, which is both on the bad side too. I don't see any positive kick from it either. So.
Right. Well, I'm very sensitive, and so I prefer to try and, use it only once or twice a week. And so, but just your basic like caffeine plus L-theanine combination is really effective. And I like to use a lot of adaptogens, like lion's mane mushroom is really, really effective for neurogenesis and nerve growth improvements. And so someone who, wants to go maybe more down a natural route can start looking at some of the medicinal mushrooms, and some of the adaptogen, like rhodiola, can help with focus and concentration. So, I've thrown a lot of different nootropics out there just now, but one key is that I want people who, like in this specific scenario, are, number one, focused on the particular cognitive need that they have at any given time, and B, are capable of creating a variety of different stacks and compounds that can help them over the course of the day or over the course of the week without becoming tolerant to any specific compound. Because remember, our body is constantly seeking homeostasis. And if this equilibrium is thrown off by taking a substance every single day, barring a certain, set of substances where there's just, a mechanism of action that's valuable on a daily basis, then otherwise, it can create some negative effects or downside. So, that's just kind of a basic overview, but there's definitely a whole class of compounds that I could recommend to people on a daily basis that I use regularly for mitochondrial health. But that's another conversation altogether. And
Nootropedia does have like dosing and frequencies schedules. Yeah.
I mean, it has the recommended dosing for that specific compound. Now, some clarification, that dosing might come from existing studies on humans. And the studies oftentimes use a far higher dosage than what is used commonly by nootropics users, and B, just because that's the dosage that is used in the study and recommended doesn't necessarily mean that's what we recommend you take every day. So for example, rhodiola rosea is an adaptogen, and it is a plant that can help the body deal with stress. And if you have there's various doses that you could take. I wouldn't recommend people take it every single day, although they can. But if they're taking it every single day, then they're probably taking a dosage that needs to be for chronic stress. If they're taking a dose that's every couple weeks when they're feeling like it's going to be tough, they need to up their nootropic game, they might take something for acute stress, which those are different doses and they're different purposes and they're different frequencies. And so I know it sounds complicated, but it is, again, modulating our biochemistry and specifically our neurochemistry is not ever going to be easy or reductive. And anyone who says it is not giving the whole truth.
No, for sure. It's the biochemistry is complicated, and you can complicate that by the fact that there is individual biochemistry and sensitivities going on too. From a larger perspective, do you find that vitamin C enhances the potency of most nootropics?
I've never found, in any of my personal experiments that vitamin C has that effect. And in fact, I haven't seen it in the literature either, but I do know that vitamin C does interact with certain enzymes. So for example, if you take piperine, it's the extract of black pepper, and it suppresses a very specific enzyme that curcumin pairs well with. Let me rephrase that. So piperine blocks this enzyme that typically makes curcumin not bioavailable. So when you combine curcumin and piperine, you have this bioavailable curcumin, which has, numerous benefits: inflammation, immune health, etc. Now, piperine also blocks this enzyme and increases the bioavailability of vitamin C. And so you have a really interesting drug interaction that kind of points towards how the body breaks down exogenous vitamin C, and provides just more evidence that's, not necessarily relevant to the vitamin C conversation, but just relevant that, like, even something as innocuous as vitamin C is still interacting with certain enzymes that get impacted if you're trying to take this other quote unquote good supplement that can also interact with prescription drugs in a bad way. So yeah, that's my little shtick on vitamin C.
Yeah, we can. I mean, that's a very deep rabbit hole, and not to plug my own ID Life, but that's one of the big things that drew me to ID Life was the ability to screen for pharmaceutical and vitamin and mineral interaction, because there's so many of those interactions that go on, and I mean, there's just a bizarro long list of these interactions, both positive and negative, but no doctor can keep up with all of that. It's impossible. So we have an algorithm built in that checks all of that. So just as for instance, beta carotene and smoking, right? I mean, that's a very, very common interaction where if heavy smokers are given excess amounts of beta carotene, their instance of lung cancer increases, and it's been studied over. It's not a correlation thing; it is a causation thing. But most people don't know that, right? Most doctors don't know that, and so if you're creating a supplement program for somebody who's a heavy smoker, you want them to quit smoking, but while they're still smoking, you don't want to dose them with excess beta carotene, for instance, which leads me to the idea of pinpointed supplementation by using genetics testing to be able to dial that in. And you and I were talking before we came online here how this is kind of in its infancy right now, but there are still some steps we can take using genetics testing to try to better dial in the supplementation.
Yeah, absolutely. The very basic data that we have from 23andMe, and then plugging that into Promethease or the Self Decode, which was Joe Cohen's platform, or any of these other. I think Rhonda Patrick has her own platform as well. They're all very affordable, and they can provide some specific snips of advice, no pun intended, where you can essentially see where you might be deficient. You can see historically or genetically where you might have a propensity for certain diseases. And so, I haven't been lucky enough to take that test and find a specific nutrient that's just the easy win. But there are a lot of people that I've had the good fortune to interact with who have, for example, seen the results from 23andMe and Promethease and decided to start supplementing with vitamin D, and they just had astronomical differences. I mean, really, like focus and concentration and all of these things you'd never attribute to vitamin D in the literature, because I mean it's a hormone. It shouldn't have that kind of an effect unless you're deficient in some specific way and you require supplementation. And the same, you could probably speak to this better than I can, for people with MTHFR mutations using methylfolate or some other type of supplement. So there's definitely some people for whom simple nutrient changes, and this even is related to dietary changes, can have drastic cognitive effects. And it can also inform some of the substances that you use and the frequency that you use them on the stimulant side, like caffeine and modafinil. There's really good information about how your body enzymatically is breaking down these stimulants, and therefore what kind of doses are probably good for you to be taking. So I have actually, Vice picked up a video that I did about using the genetic data and kind of informing a nootropic stacker as a result of that. So it's definitely common amongst the nootropics community, and like you said, it is in its infancy, so it's not a highly robust kind of prescriptive type of tool, but for a few $100s, even if you get one or two, small things out of it, it's for the best.
It's getting better and better. And our mutual friend, Ryan Freisinger, uses genetic testing. That's the underpinning of his entire process. I shouldn't say it's the underpinning, because he does use a personal interview as part of his intake as well. But the genetic testing is a big part of that. And to his point, two people can have the same SNP in play genetically, and that SNP play out in the real world in two different ways between two different people, which is why it's very important for him to do the face-to-face interview as well, so that he can determine which way this thing is going to go. And it's above my pay grade for sure, way above my pay grade. But I've seen him work magic on people, bringing them back to health in doing this. But yeah, I think it's a super interesting piece of this whole biohacking thing that we're talking about, the idea of being able to really, really dig into your genetic profile and supplement accordingly. I think it's super cool.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about the purely subjective being in touch with your body. And it's not scientific, and therefore sometimes it's not always popular. But I'll give you a perfect example. I've taken 300 milligrams of phenylpiracetam before, and within the past probably 6 months, I've only been taking 100 milligrams. And I've consistently found that the smaller doses of phenylpiracetam actually help me focus better, and they actually help me focus longer in the day. Whereas if I take 300 milligrams, it seems blunted, and it seems like it is not impactful as long. Now, there's no scientific literature. I can't even do a test necessarily. I mean, I probably could create an elaborate test, but it's very challenging to create something to actually consider this. But subjectively, I'm positive of this effect with me specifically. And I encourage other people to have that similar self-awareness, where they're saying, like, there's no reason for this to be the case. There's no evidence scientifically in other senses, but I note that it is because I trust my own experience in this regard and, react accordingly.
Yeah, I was going to bring up when you brought up the stacking thing, which is, I mean, there's lots of value to that for sure. But you're probably better off, at least initially, to take these baby steps, add a substance in, and track how you're doing for a while, right? And really get some data back on yourself before you throw the kitchen sink at it and you have a reaction and you don't know what caused what. Do you continue to take the kitchen sink, or do what was the major player that caused the reaction? It may have been the kitchen, it may have been the stack in total, or it may have been one substance that was overriding everything else. So I like the idea of small steps and tracking how you're feeling over time and adjusting, because like you say, I've had the same reaction too to different things, where the Western mind thinks more is better, or more is going to cause a greater effect, but it doesn't always work that way, surprisingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, That's one of the problems that I find with nootropic stacks that are pre-made, is that many people, they don't have any information about how the ingredients are interacting with themselves. And so, you know, something like an alpha brain, for example, could cause a reaction and no one would know what the product is, or which product is causing the problem. So, you know, but by the same token, a lot of people who are into nootropics are not necessarily trying to spend hours of their time and day dedicated towards figuring out all this kind of biohacking stuff. And so my suggestion for anybody who's looking at these pre-made stacks is, consider who's making them, who's the team behind it. Are they transparent, and do you trust, you know, kind of their background credentials, et cetera? And then the other component is, what is the objective of that stack? What is the purpose? And most times you'll find, kind of looking at those criteria, that 90% of the products out there are heavy stimulant like caffeine, and probably more caffeine than a cup of coffee, but 10, 20 times more expensive because they sprinkle on a few other ingredients too, which may or may not be dangerous or just not really effective at all. So I'd say that's like 80 to 90% of the products out there. And then there's another subset that you can look for that actually have good formulations, but you have to still be mindful that you're not going to know which compound is interacting with you in a negative way. And sometimes they have this one size fits all kind of approach to products, which is why they create it. And then you have to do some, you know, kind of finagling of your own, dosage. And, you know, a perfect example is a product called Qualia Mind. And, you know, Qualia Neurohacker Collective produced this Qualia Mind product. And they recommend taking 7 capsules per serving, and you get 22 servings with this product. And I realized that I'm so sensitive to stimulation that I only need 3 capsules per dose. And it is like a high powered, I'm functioning very, very well. And at that dose, only taking it once a week, which is about how I cycle it, I am literally taking $100 bottle for a whole year, because it's once a week and it's less than half of a dose. And so there's ways to utilize these nootropic stacks, these pre-made stacks, effectively, that just require a little bit of tweaking. So you don't have to discount them completely, but you do have to do your research to find the ones that are, you know, effective.
Yeah, I like Qualia. It's a really, really good product. I think the flip side of that are the products that label paint. So, you know, they might come from looking at the label, they might have everything in it under the sun. The problem is the effective dose is not met on any one of those one particular products. So that's something else to be mindful of too. Just because a product says it has a certain substance in it, which cool, a lot of times it's just a very, very minute amount that's actually in the product. So something else to keep in mind too.
Yeah, they call it like fairy dusting.
Yeah, fairy dusting, label painting, all. Well, speaking of microdosing, let's kind of slide into the psychedelic microdosing side of things. So we have the nootropics, and maybe this is quick. Would you consider a microdose psychedelic a nootropic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It actually, I would say, fits a classic definition of a nootropic, in the sense that there's high potential for upside, for improved cognitive performance. The one study by James Fadiman in 1966, that kind of like precursor study that has informed a lot of the microdosing experience now, was very comprehensive as far as the results that it showed. And there's very few risks of side effects, especially with a microdose. So I would say it definitely classifies as a nootropic.
Yeah. Have you what have you microdosed lately, and what effects have you seen?
Well, so I've tried LSD and I've tried psilocybin, and technically the definition of a microdose from James Fadiman is sub-perceptual. So it's a dose that you don't actually feel, and that's kind of the point, is that it's slightly altering brain chemistry, but you don't feel it, and that's how it allows you to maintain kind of this existing consciousness while modulating some elements of creativity. I have found the LSD microdosing experience to be relatively fruitful as far as creativity is concerned. I've found the psilocybin to be a little bit more. It tends to be a little bit more body oriented. This is when I can, obviously I can feel it, so it's perceptual. And that doesn't have any negative effects, but it does mean that I'm more susceptible to want to be doing something in my body, which is great. Just go out and do some kind of what would you say, kind of ad lib movement exercises, just as my body
spur of the moment, whatever.
Yeah, just kind of whatever my body's feeling like moving. I've had experiences like that, which are really good. And I haven't started yet, but I am starting a ayahuasca microdosing program that will be coming up in the next week or two, actually. And there's no DMT in it. It is just the ayahuasca vine, and I can report back to you. But the way that it's been described to me is that there's a lot of these alkaloids in the ayahuasca vine, harmaline and harmine, which do interact with brain chemistry. We know from a scientific perspective that they improve, neural regeneration and neural protection. But there's also effects of the alkaloids themselves, and maybe similar to cacao. If you've ever had like a really, really rich, thick cup of like bitter cacao, there's a sensation associated with it. It's not caffeine, and it's not, just like obviously a psychedelic, but it does have a sensation to it. So there's subtleties, but I definitely recommend it. And the number of people that have found benefit from microdosing in a work or professional context is pretty high. James Fadiman did a recent survey study with about 500 people microdosing, and some really tremendous benefits. And then the previous study in the 1966 actually suggested that there was like about a 44% solution rate of people who came into the microdosing study with some type of problem that they've been trying to solve for many weeks or months. And so to come in, to have like, I think it was something like 20 or some odd participants come in. These are mechanical engineers, they're architects, there's a wide variety of professionals. They had problems that were real, like major problems in their professional life, and 44% or so were able to solve their problems that became patents, etc. That's a really, firm endorsement of microdosing. And like I said, the side effects are minimal to non-existent, and the risk is non-existent, except for the fact that these are still absurdly Schedule I illegal drugs.
Yeah, for sure. When people have I've had experience microdosing, LSD, psilocybin. Those are the big two. And I think the way I explain it to people, the best way I can explain it is being able to connect dots that you wouldn't otherwise be able to connect, right? There's just some kind of something happening in your brain that allows you to put two very, very disparate ideas together and make a new creation or a new whole that you wouldn't have otherwise seen.
Right.
That's about the best way that I can put it. when you were microdosing the psilocybin, was it in the alcohol suspension? So were you able to drop it out, or was it plant material?
It was plant material, so it was just I used a coffee grinder to grind up all the actual fungus, and had a powder, like a very fine powder, that I could dose on a weighted measurement scale. And it wasn't perfect, but add a little bit of lemon juice, and that's how I would take it, and see a range of effects depending on the dose.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So I've gone both ways. I've had the psilocybin in suspension, which you could perfectly drop out and perfectly measure, and you titrate up until you feel an effect, and you come back down a few drops. So there was that way. And I've done the plant material, and I probably went the other way on the plant material, where I was too lazy to grind. So I would just break off a piece, and that looks like the right size. And there's a couple days where you're like, yeah, that was a little much, but
yeah. I've had those before. Oh, I'm not getting that.
Yeah. Oh, that was not quite a microdose, but okay, we'll roll with it. And then on the LSD side, then it's a matter of trying to cut a tab into small enough pieces, which is kind of a pain too. So I wish that LSD could be put in some kind of an alcohol suspension as well. I don't know enough about the chemistry to know if that's possible or not, but.
Yeah, well, you can actually do it with distilled water. It's possible to basically measure out the amount of water in a little pipette, basically create your own, which you can get at any kind of pharmacy. And you measure out the total volume of water to be, like 10 servings for easy math purposes. And then you put the tab in. And over time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, the LSD should dissolve into the distilled water. Although the distilled water is key in this kind of water suspension. And then you should have regularly equitable doses with each of the pipette if you've measured the water correctly in the first place. So that's one. And I've done a video on Nootropedia. It's actually on YouTube it's probably one of the most famous on the channel on that specific subject.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So check that out. And that makes me wish I'd have paid much, much more attention in high school chemistry. But I never had a teacher that put it to me this way. These are the things you could do if you know a little bit of chemistry. Yeah,
imagine how many people would be interested in learning if they're like, hey, someday you might want to make some LSD.
It's very true. You have to reach kids where they're at and make it practical. And I had a total line of thought I was going to go down, and I totally lost it with that. Microdosing. Oh, I know what it was. The lemon juice. Was there any reason for the lemon juice?
Yeah, the lemon juice, from my understanding, this comes from Kyle Kingsbury by way of Chad Walding. It eases the processing of psilocybin to psilocin. So that's psychoactive in the stomach. Oftentimes people who take the mushrooms find, especially like a bigger dose, find that they have stomach issues, nausea, and that is usually attributed to this conversion process whereby the body is converting the psilocybin into the psychoactive psilocin. And so if you utilize the lemon, the thought is, and this is theoretical, I don't really understand science behind it, I haven't looked at it, but it reduces that discomfort that comes with the stomach issue. It also just makes the little mushroom drink that you have basically taste like lemonade.
Got on. Yeah, cool. Yeah. And on the ayahuasca microdosing, it's funny because I just had Zach Poitra on this morning, who's the interview I had earlier today. and he was talking about microdosing ayahuasca and the vine, in particular for the antidepressive qualities, because it is a MAO inhibitor. So we were talking about that, and he said it's interesting that the native cultures call the vine medicine, but not the chacruna leaf, and the chacruna leaf is what has the DMT. So when you put the two mixtures together, you have the MOI inhibitor in the vine, which allows the DMT to be absorbed through the gut. Mm-hmm. But he said but the indigenous tribes call the medicine the vine and not the chacruna leaf. So they have this understanding that the vine is where the real medicine is, and that the chacruna leaf may give you, gives you the fireworks, gives you the ability to do soul work, so to speak, but that the physical medicine is contained in the vine. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. They call it ayahuasca. That's the name of the vine. They don't call it chacruna.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
Super, super interesting. Well, let me know how that microdosing goes. I'd be interested in that for sure.
Just in you saying that, I'm realizing that I'm gonna have to be even extra mindful about what nootropics I'm taking, because there's going to be interactions.
Sure. Yeah.
With this MAOI. So this would be interesting.
Yeah. N equals 1 experimentation. That's what citizen science is all about. Yeah. When we did our pre-interview back, you mentioned something that I thought was very, very profound. And you talked about the practice of using nootropics, and that many people come at this with a wrong idea. And generally what happens is they get to the wrong place faster. Mm-hmm. Right. Can you expound upon that idea? Because I thought that was a really profound idea.
Yeah. Well, with Nootropedia, we've got, I think at this point it's like 150,000 people coming to the website every single month. And I start to see patterns, and I start to see things that are coming over and over again. And a lot of people I notice within the nootropics community are utilizing, these are powerful tools, right? Nootropics are super powerful tools, and you can use them to get anywhere. So to take an extreme example, it's plausible for some like serial killer or some dictator to use nootropics to effectively murder people or create, destruction upon the earth. And so they're tools, but they have to be applied in the right direction. And what I've seen consistently is a lot of people, they utilize nootropics as a way of almost filling a void, just as if it was alcohol or smoking or, any other kind of drug. And indeed, these are drugs. So, it's so interesting in the West, in America, we consider people who are, interested in, like, they want to do heroin, and it's like, oh man, they're wounded and they're addicted, and it's a character flaw in need of some care or something. But if somebody says, oh, I'm really interested in productivity, I'm going to take modafinil and Adderall and all that stuff, not only as a society do we look the other way, we actually encourage it. Our doctors encourage widespread use of amphetamine-based drugs, and it is much easier to be successful and to make a lot of money when you're using these kinds of stimulants and stuff. And so it's kind of coming from a similar place in these different people. They're just choosing different outlets, and the outcomes are slightly different. And so I want people to be able to use nootropics to improve their performance, but I also want people to ask themselves the hard questions of what is the root of, trying to use this kind of nootropic? Where is it coming from? What am I trying to achieve? And, is this the greatest good that I'm capable of in the world? Because I will have, just as a very, basic example, someone who comes to me who really wants to be a painter or an artist of some sort, but they're working this professional job, and because they need money, but they also feel they need to be making a certain amount so that they can live up to the expectations of their parents or their partners. And so they're working this job that they don't like. And so even if they have caffeine, they're not focused on their work, because of course, who's going to be focused on something that you're not really all that motivated to do? And so they're looking for more stimulants and more stimulants. And so I have to try and catch them somewhere in this process and say, like, hey, here's some great, answers to your questions. And I encourage you to think a little bit deeper about why you're doing it in the first place. There was a really hilarious example. Yes, it was on my YouTube channel. It was about 6 months ago, where someone said, I really don't want to go to medical school. I don't want to start, but I know that I'm going to need help with focus and concentration. What can I do if I with this situation? And my answer was literally, don't go to medical school. Like, stop trying to take stimulants to get through 5 years of your life. Like, if you don't like it now, don't do it. But I think that's where my perspective on what I'm creating has started to change as I've seen other people's, relationships with nootropics. Yeah,
both of us have. Obviously, we both live in Austin. Austin being a very entrepreneurial town, but it's a very, very common story of people who have made it. Right, they have all the cars, all the apartments, all the chicks, all the money, all the everything, and they just are like, this isn't it. This is not it. And that's what comes to mind when you said the other day about getting to the wrong place faster, because they've generally utilized all the tools, right? Every tool available to them, including nootropics, to get to that point of realizing it's not it. It's not where I want to be. And I'm still not happy. Even with all these material goods, I'm still no better than I was. And maybe it could be argued, okay, they figured that out when they were 30 instead of waiting till they were 50 to finally make it and figure it out. But still, they got to the wrong place, and they got to the wrong place quicker. So,
exactly, yeah. And that's where burnout comes from, and that's where, all these kinds of problems come from. And, I think that applying them in a balanced way is it's far more sustainable, but it creates far more effective end results.
Well, yeah, nootropics are a tool just like any other tool out there. It's up to you to have your life figured out and to apply the right tool at the right time. Which I think this is a great segue, Mans, to talk about what is your latest project that you're working on, and because it's very, very exciting to me, but I want people to hear it from you and not me to try to explain it. So let's talk about your new endeavor.
Yeah. So, one thing that I think is missing from people's lives is experiences. And we live in a world where, consumerism is very popular in America, especially, and it's possible to buy anything just you can get it at your fingertips. And we've kind of, I believe, and this is to quote Dennis McKenna, but we're a society that's bereft of meaning and spirituality. And I have found transformational experiences personally to be super valuable. And so I'm trying to create basically an organization, a business that is facilitating transformational experiences in other people. And many of these transformational experiences are things that we have historically done as humans for tens of thousands of years, specifically hunting, guided hunting experiences, and then also psychedelic and plant medicine experiences. And I think that they have the opportunity to provide individuals with clarity around, their purpose and specifically their relationship to the world around them. I think purpose and meaning come from where I fit in the world around me. And by being in touch with, and what I like how I say reharmonizing with the world around with us, we can more readily tap into, what is authentically our greatest gifts.
And you've had such an experience recently, correct?
Yeah, I did. It was 3 specific instances that led to this catalyst. One of them was in November last year. I had an ayahuasca retreat where I had a ceremony that I had a deep empathy for the animal that I was going to be hunting. And I asked a higher power to support a swift kill with this animal. I'd never been hunting before at the time, and so I really felt the responsibility deeply to be taking the life of an animal. And I went home and I practiced every day for the whole month before going out into the hunt for about a week. And there was a lot of cold, a lot of time when I was out on that hunt where I was bored and struggling in the elements. But I had one shot, the only shot I've ever taken at an animal, the first shot I've ever taken at an animal, and I went straight through the heart of the antelope. And at that moment, I felt a very strong connection to not just a higher power, because I had asked for that to happen, but also a strong connection to this animal that would provide me with food. And I took the skin of the animal and went to another ayahuasca retreat and had some realizations about, the food that I was eating and how that becomes a part of my being, and how my impact with the food that I eat, whether it's vegetables or whether it's meat, is very profound for the planet. And so I made a commitment that I was only going to eat meat, or I was only going to cook meat at home that I had either killed or caught myself. And so I've maintained that for the better part of this year. And those experiences kind of catalyzed me being the subject of a documentary currently, and then also this new business where I'm creating the space to bring these transformational experiences to other people. And there's a lot of different transformational experiences, and I think they're all valuable, whether it's a yoga retreat or a meditation retreat, whatever the case may be. I think experiences are super valuable for us as a society, especially in the West, in our kind of disconnected urban environments. But for me specifically, I find that the hunting experience is so innate for humans, because it was our source of sustenance, and specifically for men, and not just men, but for the masculine. So even women who want to feed their masculine can also benefit from hunting experiences. And it is such a primal way of having a transformational experience. And then on the other side of the spectrum is a relationship to plants through psychedelic experiences, which of course, if you're trying to reharmonize with the world around you, there's nothing better than to completely blow through this subject object reality that we live in on a daily basis, where we think we are separate from everything else. There's me that I can touch, and then there's the something else that's separate. When you do a large enough dose of psychedelics and you see that that's a fallacy, and you see the interconnectedness with the world around you, it's more easy, in my experience, to see where we fit in to the world around us and how we can best, serve the world around us.
Yeah. Two very, very powerful experiences. I have not had those experiences back to back, which would be very, very interesting. I hunted a lot as part of my culture growing up. And I remember how that, I can specifically remember what it felt like the first time I killed an animal, and I realized that I had the power to do that, and B, that I actually caused something to quit living. And that, and you can, it's a very abstract thought until it actually happens. And you can't explain the feeling in that moment. Right. I mean, I think it's something that you just have to experience to understand what that really feels like, if you are truly a thinking, empathetic human being who's dialed in.
Yeah. It's really fascinating to me. I've spoken openly about this, but I haven't, it's not become my full, persona yet, but I get so much hate mail already and so much grief about it. And it's just interesting to see that, 96-97% of Americans eat meat, and only 3-4% have gone hunted, and so I don't think that everybody has to hunt, but I question that disconnect between this dead animal on my plate and where it came from. And I am just curious and inquisitive in that way. And I hope that other people are too. And even for the people who are vegans, I think there's a lot more overlap between what I'm espousing and what they hold true than they believe, because civilization, whether we like it or not, is detrimental to environments, to ecosystems, to animals. I remember I was in Alaska a couple of weeks ago, and there's one stretch of about 1 mile of highway where in 1 year there was like 312 moose that died just from that small stretch of highway, just because of cars. Imagine it's a vegan community. They're all driving cars. You still 312 moose are gone. And I don't think that everybody has to have that experience, but when you have that experience, it unlocks a different sense of empathy, a different sense of understanding of what that's like. And it really is. It's like you cannot understand what it's like until you do it. So yeah, it was very profound. And I think that it can be very profound if it's provided in a certain context that is more in alignment with what a lot of people are looking for in, as Dennis says, like our spiritually bereft society.
Yeah. Well, I think if more people did go hunting, there would be a larger outcry against CAFOs for sure. Right, because you understand that an animal taken, immediately and in the moment is totally different than an animal who has suffered for months in a CAFO situation before it's finally put down. Two totally different situations.
Yeah.
And there is the opportunity for, if done correctly in hunts, there is the opportunity for a reverence, to be given to the animal for giving its life so that you can continue your life. And that opportunity is missed out on by people who don't hunt. And it's, you understand that, or we all understand that not everybody can hunt for every morsel of meat they have on their plate. But if you can at least be exposed to it, maybe even just once in your life, I think that's a big step forward.
Absolutely. I think if 90% of the people who go on a guided hunt with me become vegan, I will be totally, happy that they have had an experience that has triggered a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them and how they choose to fit into that world. And I'm all, for that conversion, if you will.
Yeah. And pairing that with the plant medicine experience has got to be very, very powerful, because if you go back to our roots, this was our roots, that aspect and the hunting aspect. And two very powerful things put together. And what is the name of the venture, man?
Yes, the name of the company is Oyasin, and it comes from the Lakota word Matakiyasin, which means we're all connected. And it is going to launch in the next couple months. But we've got this kind of concept where we are reharmonizing with nature, and specifically to animals through hunting, specifically with plants through the plant medicine, and for each person to go on their own journey. We also have a series of products that help individuals to bring more ceremony into their life, whether it be like a cacao ceremony or whether it be some other like consumable products that they can use in their own journey. And so that's kind of conceptually how Oyasin is framed. And it is, we also have a nonprofit arm where we're going to be doing indigenous support for these indigenous peoples who have preserved many of these practices that we are, bringing to modern urban people. We also have like conservation efforts for direct conservation and support of the environment. And then also part of our funding with the nonprofit is into psychedelic sciences, and specifically how to conduct, good research that propels psychedelic science.
This might be throwing a curveball at you, but this is top of my mind just because I talked to Zach again earlier today. Will you have combo ceremonies prior to the hunting expeditions?
I probably will not for the first year at least. I probably will not. There's obviously some liability associated with something like that. Although for right now, combo is technically legal in America, so that could definitely be a major part of the new events that start coming up next year. And I will probably spend some time brainstorming how to incorporate that, because I think I've done combo myself, and traditionally in South America, as you I'm sure know, they do combo before hunting. And I think it would be a valuable experience for a lot of people to have that kind of combination.
Yeah. So just a real quick recap on combo. It's a frog venom poison that is dried and then administered through burn marks in the skin. And it releases these toxins into the body, causes a very, very profound effect that lasts for about 20 minutes. That profound effect being that you feel like you're freaking dying for 20 minutes or so. And then you come back around, and on the flip side of that is a few days of just feeling like you can conquer the world. It's an incredible plant. Well, it's not a plant medicine. It's an incredible medicine.
Yes.
And very, very strong effects. But yes, traditionally used either before hunting or before war or before any engagement of sorts that would take monumental effort, and to have the senses on cue. And so it's a very, very, very cool medicine.
Yes, it will be a part of the documentary film that I'm a subject of.
Oh, cool.
So I did a ceremony all on camera, very intense experience, but very
intense.
beneficial.
Yeah, every time that when people ask, well, what's combo and what happens, and you tell them, and they're like, and why in the world would you do that? Why would you? Yeah, it's you have to feel
all the other ones, like yeah, like whether it's psilocybin or ayahuasca, it's always like what I'm learning and all these things, and yeah, it's challenging, it's hard, but like overall, it's like such a positive experience. And then when I describe combo, everyone's like, "You're crazy."
Yeah, it's but you have to go through it. You have to feel what the other side feels like, and then you'll get it. But yeah, if you were just, I can't imagine someone like walking in the middle of one of those ceremonies and going, why would anyone want to go through that? I don't get it. But yeah, it's very, very. It's just a profound experience in and of its own right. But yeah, that would be interesting as well to see.
Yeah, I appreciate, because I've thought about doing psychedelic experiences in combination with hunting experiences, but obviously for legal reasons that's challenging.
Yeah.
But combo specifically from a legal perspective is less challenging and actually more applicable in some senses. So that's going to be something that I research for sure. So I appreciate it.
I love the idea. So tell us a little bit more about the documentary.
Yeah, the documentary is it's being directed by Barlow Jacobs. He's a 9-time Sundance award-winning director and producer. So he's very credentialed, very creative, and he was actually sitting next to me in that November ayahuasca experience. And he got to, witness some of those early transformative epiphanies that I had. And then it came full circle when he visited early in this year. And I decided basically that I was going to continue down that rabbit hole. And that meant that I was drawn towards combo because that was a medicine that was used in a hunting tradition. And I was also drawn towards doing, like bigger game stalking type of hunts. And so I organized one for September. And so things have just kind of coalesced. We've got, investors who have backed the project. We now have a crew, a whole documentary crew, a series of like fantastic interviews lined up. And really it's going to be, the narrative is around the hunt that I have, which is a 10-day hunt in the backcountry of Idaho, which I'm preparing for right now. And the film crew is going to be there capturing the whole hunt. And then we'll be doing a series of different interviews with, hunting experts, psychedelics experts, etc. But the real, I've kind of told you the nuts and bolts, but to kind of boil it down, it's examining our relationship with the circle of life and death. And I've had transformative experiences from the combination of hunting and psychedelics, and we're exploring both of those in our, exploration in the film as well. And so hunting obviously plays the major role from a story perspective, and then we will bring in the psychedelics in a few creative ways that I'll let you.
Cool. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Mans, I think I've sucked up enough of your time for today. I know you're a busy guy, and
always a fun chat with you, buddy.
Always great to chat with you, Mans. And I have the opportunity, because we both live in Austin, to have chats now and again and grab coffee, and it's always an awesome experience to talk with Mans. And when he first told me about Oilus, and I was super, super thrilled, because that's right up my alley too. And I'm so glad that Mans is doing that, because I can't wait to hop along for the ride at some point. All right, Mans. Well, for Health Hacker FX, we're going to bid you adieu. Thank you very much for coming on the show and speaking. And tell us how folks can get up with you.
Yeah, you can just go ahead and, you can send me an email if you have direct questions. My name, MANSAL, at Nootropedia, NOOTROPEDIA.com. go ahead and visit Nutripedia.com for, any clarification around some of the nootropics info that I mentioned today. And go ahead and feel free to send any emails, find me on social, and send me messages there. I'm pretty much an open book. I've started to definitely stopped accepting friend requests on Facebook from everybody, every Tom, Dick, and Harry. But if you have a question, then I should be able to answer it no matter what.
Tapped out at 5,000 too, so don't even try.
I don't have 5,000, but I do like to see on my feed things from people that I know in person. That's,
right.
That's the key.
Right. Yeah. Right on. And can you spell oiocin for people if they're trying to find that, or do you have a website for that yet?
Yes. So the website is not up yet, but it's spelled OYASIN. It will be oiocin.io, and they can check that out. And hopefully, it won't look too funky in the preparation phases.
Okay. So for Health Hacker FX, signing out for now. Mans, have a good day, and I will see you soon, brother.
See ya.